everyone. Welcome to Just Say It, the podcast by communicators for communicators. On this show, we have in-depth conversations with journalists, messaging experts, designers, marketers, leaders, and managers, and unpack their wisdom and experience. Each episode is designed for strategic communicators looking to level up and advance their careers. I'm your host, Rochelle Bedell. Rani has worked at Adobe for over 15 years in a variety of roles, including head of employee advocacy, program management for influencer marketing, and operations manager for customer communications. When working in influencer marketing, Rani used authentic listening and compelling storytelling to highlight Adobe customers doing extraordinary things with Adobe products. In her current role, Rani continues her efforts to highlight Adobe customers and nonprofits doing extraordinary things through customer communications. In this role, Rani works to source stories and elevate them through use of Adobe Platforms. Rani, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Rochelle. So happy to be here.
It's so good to have you. So Rani, you spent a lot of your career at Adobe. Can you give us a little bit of background, how you got started there, and then how you made your journey through, how you ended up in customer communications?
Prior to coming to Adobe, I was with IBM and I was in hardware, right? Doing project management, account executive work with different companies. And it was all about their point of sale equipment and implementing hardware into their retail stores, whichever customer we were working with. And so having been there about 10 years, I was like, this is getting way too easy. I'm not even using my brain muscles. I need to go into something completely different. So I thought, why not make a complete 360 pivot and go into software? And so that's how I came into Adobe. And I started in program management because I felt like that's one area that you can get a multitude of exposure across the company and basically not necessarily be pigeonholed in any one area, So that was a real broad stroke for me, and that was fantastic. It accomplished exactly what I was hoping for, which is give me access to a variety of people and a variety of departments. And then from there, I started to really hone in on what makes my heart sing and what the kind of things that I wanted to do, which was around mobilizing people and working with customers, right? So originally, I went into content and community management, which is all about working with external community members. And then from there, I moved into influencer relations, which is about mobilizing people externally who have a really strong social footprint and get them to advocate and evangelize for Adobe. Then I went into customer support, which is about helping our customers, right, get up and running with our software. And then from there, I moved into employee advocacy, which was much more of an internal facing role, which I loved because ultimately your biggest advocates are your employees. So energizing employees and training them and instilling confidence in them about how they can and should evangelize for the company. That was super fun. But I realized my roots were really, and my heart was with the customer. And so this is where I came back into, I shouldn't say came back into, but reconnected with customers. And there was an opportunity within the customer communications team to do what I'm doing right now, which is elevate these individual stories.
Well, I really didn't realize that you had such a broad background in such a variety of roles. You've really traveled quite a long ways in all the different things that you've done. And I feel like we could go into a lot of those different areas. But for today, we're really going to be looking at customer communications and what you're doing right now. And I know that a couple of days ago, you shared with me a story, and I'm hoping you can share it with us now and with our audience. You mentioned a creator that you worked with named Milo Fowler. Can you tell us his story and how you and Adobe helped to elevate his efforts?
Yeah, he is a phenomenal Navajo photographer, and he's also a Lightroom ambassador for Adobe. So, Lightroom is one of our products, and so he's been an ambassador for a couple of years, and he uses a variety of Adobe's products. But he has this incredible thirst and a real knack for using light in his photography. And I don't know anything about photography, so this was really mesmerizing for me for how light plays such a major role in how good a shot looks. But he also had a real desire to do for his community. And so he was explaining to us how there was an entire reservation of families without electricity. And so he was using the proceeds of his photographs to purchase or fund solar energy for these families. And then we did this whole video and customer story on that, again, elevating him and the work that he's doing. And oh, by the way, he happens to use Adobe products to do it, right? Which is just a wonderful added touch. But the work he's doing is just phenomenal. And he's so inspirational, and he's gotten so many people to realize how much good they can do with their creativity.
I love this story. Can you tell me how you go about finding creators that are using Adobe products? What is that process like? Are you scouring the internet forum? Are you looking at your customer base and saying, oh, this person's using Adobe products, let me see what they're doing? What's that process like?
I wish there was a science to it. There really isn't, in that I do scour the internet. There's so much word of mouth, and we have databases that once I find compelling stories, I put stories into a database. Ultimately, because Adobe has such an iconic brand that people fall all over themselves to tell us that they're using Adobe, right? So it's not very difficult, Rochelle. It's not a matter of, oh, I take these steps and I do this. It's very, very organic. Just because of the 7 billion people out there, I'm sure about 6.9 use Adobe. So it's not a very difficult fishing expedition.
So then tell me, I know you have a very unique view on customer communications, and you have this very beautiful, authentic way of looking at it. Can you tell us from your perspective what every person working in customer communications should be doing?
We need to be the halo and not the hero. I want customer communication folks to make customer stories about the customer, not constantly tout what the company is doing and how we're powering the customer. I mean, that needs to be an afterthought almost, and it needs to be done tastefully. And it's about really elevating these diverse voices and these diverse customers and putting a spotlight on who they are, what they're doing, why they're doing it, and where appropriate, show where your company is helping in that pursuit. But don't, jam pack your blog posts and your stories full of, Adobe or whoever the company is, self-referential links and touting your own horn. That's not what it's about, right? And it's so sleazy and slimy, and it's just a bad look, right? And you will get so much more coverage if you can put the light on the person, because obviously they're going to talk about how the company is helping them, right? But if you lead with that, it's just not what anybody wants to read.
I think this is so important, especially when we look at the younger generation. So we're looking at Gen Z or millennials. If you lead with the company, as soon as they get any feeling that it's an ad, they're gone. They're gone so fast. But if you tell the story of someone, that's compelling. And I don't know, it really speaks to people. And you almost don't even need to mention a company in that regard, a small little hashtag. Or it seems to me that the companies that are very subtle are the ones that those ads are going, I say those stories are going further because they really resonate with people.
I feel like it mirrors real life, right? If I need to tell you I'm sophisticated, or if I need to tell you I'm such and such, chances are I'm not, right? Like, people who are those things just are. You don't need to talk about it, right? So
Absolutely. It actually reminds me a lot of theory that I was researching when I was preparing for my master's degree. And this is a theory about B2B content networking. And the idea is that as a company, you can create a platform, whether it be a podcast, a blog, whatever forum you want it to be, and you work with your ideal customer to jointly create content for that platform. So I would look at who's my ideal customer, and then I would say, look at the person who would be the one making the deal for that product that I currently produce. And I would say, would you like to, let's say I'm doing a podcast, come on my podcast. And I want to talk about your business, what you're doing, your thought leadership here, and highlight all of your work here. And we don't talk about what I do at all. Like, we're not talking about the product that I sell or the offer that I might have to this company. We were really focused on highlighting this potential customer and their work. And then through this podcast, we create this space where all of our potential customers find value. And then they learn a little, just because I'm there, they learn a little bit about the product that I might have to offer, but it's never a sales call. It's never a, do you want my services? Right? It's just when they get to a point in their business when they're like, oh, I might need this. Oh, and I remember this person here that I did a podcast with offers that. Maybe I'll give them a call. Tell me how that works for what you're doing. I know yours is sourcing stories, but it is kind of that similar idea where you're bringing creators in, you're jointly creating content. Adobe's providing this platform for them. Can you tell us how that works in an Adobe setting?
yeah, so we co-create content with our customers all the time. And essentially, we are telling their stories. Like, we have a customer showcase page where their stories are told. We have customer advisory boards. We have like lists. I think I shared with you, we launched an inaugural top creators to watch list. So we try to connect them with one another as well, so that Adobe is the reason they got together. And so there is that kind of muscle memory of, oh, Adobe was the halo, Adobe was the reason we got into this platform. But the beauty is, Rochelle, when they connect with each other and they're helping each other and sharing best practices and lessons learned, it's fantastic. And because I'm on the scene, or Adobe employees are, like you said, lightly and loosely affiliated, when they do have a need, they don't go outside, right? They come to us. And so it's just a beautiful symbiotic kind of arrangement that's done on purpose and by design, but it's not forced. And it's certainly not, a used car salesman type sleazy pitch, right? It's very organic and it's adding value, and it's about bringing value. So I would say any opportunity that we have to connect these customers to one another, offer them, like we do free webinars and we do thought leadership stuff, and we do a lot of like how-to tutorials, because all of these customers, and I guess it's not unique to just customers, but influencers and others, everybody wants to better themselves and do better, be better, accelerate their careers. And so anything that we can do to give that kind of instructional and inspirational content, they love.
And I think this is such a powerful way for companies to really stake out space in their market. And obviously for Adobe, you guys already have a large space and you have a really good brand recognition and really good reputation. You're well known. But for other companies that are maybe starting out, lesser known, it's such a great way to create community. And what are we all looking for? We're all looking for community. We want connection. We want to be with like-minded people. And with your brand, you can create this community because you draw like-minded people to you because of what you create.
We're facilitating it, but it does take a certain kind of finesse to step back and resist the temptation to make it about yourself, right? To kind of be more the orchestrator, that kind of symphony orchestration, right? You're reminding, always adding value, but you're kind of taking a back seat. And it's not for everyone, and it's not something that a lot of people can do. You have to be confident and you have to be kind of comfortable in your own skin, that when the time is right and when the need is present, they will come to you.
Tell me a little bit more about this, because I know you mentioned before that one of the mistakes you made earlier in your career was being self-referential. Can you share a little bit more about that? And then what made you realize or have this shift in really focusing on the customer and what they're doing?
Well, when I was at IBM early in the career, I made it all about IBM products and features and functionality, and just did the very heavy sales. And I was repelling people, right? So what made me realize is when people ran in the opposite direction. And so I needed to adjust. And I thought, well, gosh, but I'm only trying to teach them what we have to offer and make sure they understood. But the reality is, you need to start with what they're trying to do, right? And the minute I realized that, then I literally couldn't keep them away, right? Like the minute I understood, if I could just turn this on its face and make it about what are they trying to do, what's keeping them up at night, where are they falling down, and what do I have that could help that in any shape or fashion. The minute I made that pivot, it was just pure magic. And then I'm like, oh, there's no going back from this, right? So
Absolutely. It's so powerful, because the last thing any of us want is those really annoying sales calls. I had someone connect with me on LinkedIn, which I love connecting with people on LinkedIn, even if it's for a short conversation, just to find out what they're doing, what their specialty is, right? And then the very next message I received from this person was, I have this product, do you want it? And I was like, oh, you just ruined it, because we were having this great conversation about what you do. And now I just don't want anything to do with you.
that's just so sad. Knowing my intentions, and I'm a good-hearted person, I know how easy it is to fall into that trap. But then when you think about it, would you ever ask someone, like, would you ever ask a neighbor to borrow a cup of sugar when you haven't even said hi to them, right? You wouldn't in real life. So what gives you the audacity to do that online?
Well, and then the tricky thing is, so take this silly example that I provided you with LinkedIn. LinkedIn, this poor person trying to help me understand what they offer, which they thought might be beneficial to me. Maybe you have some advice in how they could have done it in a better way that wouldn't have turned me off, because I wouldn't know what they had to offer if they didn't tell me what they had to offer. But just the way that they did it was so off-putting.
Well, that seems very calculated, right? Like, let me reach out to Rochelle maybe once or twice, befriend her, and then I'm going to pounce on her with my offering, right? Versus, let me read some of Rochelle's content that she's putting out on LinkedIn, maybe like or comment, and, give it a month or so and get a sense of who she is, and maybe I can DM her, maybe I could invite her to a virtual coffee or whatnot, understand who she is, what she's doing, what makes her heart sing, what is she trying to do in the world. And then as a part of a natural conversation, I'm sure you would ask the person, what do you do? What do you, and then you very naturally bring it up versus making it feel like it's very calculated robotic move, right? That somebody's learned in sales 101. Reach out twice and on the third pounce on them and don't let them go, that kind of thing.
I love that advice, because I think of how that would have changed my attitude around this person, because I was already very interested in him. And I think you're right. Eventually the conversation would have gone to this point where I would have said, what are you involved in? What makes you, what makes your heart sing? What makes you interested in waking up every morning? And it would have given them this perfect opportunity, and it wouldn't have felt like this really abrasive. Such great advice. Tell me, I want to get into the nuts and bolts of what you're doing with customer communications. But before we do that, can you share the story of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and how Adobe helped with this story, or how you promoted the story? Just give us a little bit about that story there.
Oh my gosh, this is a story I cannot speak enough about. It is one of the more meaningful things that I've done in a long, long time. So, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is a nonprofit based on the East Coast, and they do a lot of prevention work, but they also rescue exploited and missing children and reunite them with their poor families that have been longing for these kids. And so, I came to realize maybe about a decade ago that they almost exclusively use Adobe products to do their work. And so, Photoshop, for example, Photoshop has this incredible AI driven feature that allows you to age progress and age regress photographs. So, if a child was kidnapped when he or she was 6 months old, it's now been 10 years. Through the age progression feature, you could photo composite what they might look like, right? And then use that to advertise, if you will, to try to help locate that child. And so they've had tremendous success doing that. And we were able to just recently, in time for Giving Tuesday back in November, produce this beautiful video, and we put quite a bit of money behind it to do paid amplification, because I was just like, my gosh, if even one child who's missing that we were talking about could be reunited because Adobe, created this story and amplified it, my life will have been made. It just, having children myself, I cannot even fathom that terror of having a child ripped away from you, right? So they are doing magnificent work, and they have received so many awards for the work that they do. And when you hear the stories of the parents and their gratitude for what that organization does, even the toughest people are brought to their knees. I mean, I remember bringing a group of influencers to their headquarters, and there was not a dry eye in the room. And I tell you what, Rochelle, I would walk through fire for Adobe, because Adobe does so much good in the world like this, right? Like, it's not just peddling software. Like, we're truly, truly powering such amazing, impactful things in the world. And so that organization, I invite everyone to go look them up and do what you can to help spread the word of what they're doing, because that's really what they need. I mean, obviously they need donations, but anything social media, I think in the video, we point out 1 in 6 children are found through social media. So imagine if all of us could do just one thing to help them get the word out, how many more children could come home?
That's amazing. And it's such a beautiful work that they're doing. And I love that Adobe lifts that up and then just amplifies it so other people can become aware of what they're doing. Because as an individual nonprofit organization, sometimes it can be really hard to get traction out in the world. But you take a company like Adobe that has such a huge following, such a very loud voice, and they can really do something for these nonprofits. Tell me, as far as going back to your process, once you find that story and you kind of start shaping it, what happens to it after that? What channels does it get put on? What happens internally? How do you find the different teams that might use it for different stories? How does that work?
So we refer to that as go to market. Basically, we say, where can we? I mean, I'm always wanting to swing from the chandeliers with it, right? So we have the internal intranet that we put it on because we want employees to feel proud and energized and feel the pride in what Adobe is doing. We work with our social media team to figure out that given the type of asset is it best to promote on TikTok or Instagram, or if it's visually compelling and kind of short and sweet, we'll choose like TikTok and Instagram. If it's a little bit more of an in-depth expose on the customer, then it might be YouTube or LinkedIn, right? So we'll select the right channel based on that. And then we'll equip our salespeople with these stories as well. So we have a whole like field readiness kind of motion. We put it on our blog. So there's a handful of outlets that we make sure we're outfitting with it, because the point is, if we're going to spend all this time and money shaping it, you better get it out there, right? Because ultimately, if you don't, you might as well not have done it. So, and we equip the customer with it as well, because we want to make sure they've got the assets to promote it themselves too.
So do you give them the individual video files so they can upload it wherever they want, or do you just give them links?
We'll do both. I mean, we'll give them the links, because if they just want to reshare or retweet, they can happily do that. But some of them want the actual original files, and we're happy to do that as well.
Oh, that's great. And then you mentioned earlier that you also have this internal database with Adobe where you log all of these stories. What's that like? How do you keep it organized? How do you find stories in the database? I saw a video this last week that came through my feed that was by Home Depot talking about all the help they've given to customers during the hurricanes and things like that. They were using video footages from like 10 years ago. And they talked about this database that they had, right? Where they had all the releases, they had everything tagged. So it was easy to find what they needed. And I thought, wow, because we do not have a system like that where I'm working. And so I'm curious to find out, what does that look like? How do you put that together?
Yeah, so I do it for my individual stories. And so I just use it. This is a good use case of Adobe using Adobe, right? We use Workfront, one of our content management systems, and it's just so easy to chronicle. You could just put links in there if they're existing stories. If it's a story that's kind of just a seed of an idea, you can just indicate why you were drawn to this and just put a couple of lines in there to remind you. You could actually orchestrate how one thing is dependent on another. So there's almost like project management type capabilities in Workfront itself. So it's really kind of simple, and it's just so much easier on the brain than to try to do it in Excel or on pen and paper.
Yeah, no, I'm not familiar with Workfront. Is that part of the Creative Cloud suite, or is it an extra program?
Well, it's not part of the Creative Cloud product of families, but it's extra solution, if you will.
Good to know. I'm going to have to look into that because that's something that's always a challenge. And just managing files, like with the typical PC file system, it's driving me crazy because I just can't keep track of everything. And there's no way to tag it all and keep it all together. And it's just folders upon folders upon folders. So
I know, and half your life is spent finding something, right? So it's nice that we can use some of these tools and get them to help us do better and be better.
absolutely. Tell me, what has been your favorite creator or organization to work with and why?
We can never pick a favorite of our kids, honestly and genuinely cannot, because they all bring such a different flavor and perspective, right? If you look at the top creators to watch list that I sent you, Rochelle, it showcases 11 organizations or individuals who are rising stars. I can tell you, my heart is always with the up and comers, not the high maintenance divas who have already arrived, right? So I'm always trying to find those unsung heroes, almost like lifting the middle class of the creator economy, people who could really benefit from that extra muscle and the iconic brand that Adobe is to help advance their work. And so those 11 are definitely part of my in group, if you will, because they're doing so much good in the world. And Milo's on there, and as are some nonprofits, because they're doing so much good with their creativity, right? It's not just about putting money in their pockets, it's about lifting and empowering other people. And that really speaks to me, makes me happy.
Absolutely. So let's break into our Just Say It questions. These are questions that we ask at the end of every interview. Our first one is, if you could give one piece of advice to your younger self when you were just getting started in your career, what would it be?
Oh, I don't have one, I have two. And both were things that I learned from this life coach that I follow online. Her name is Marie Forleo. One is everything is figure outable, right? She has a book by this name, Everything is Figure Outable, meaning anything that you want to do, if you can break it down into its bite-sized components, you can figure it out, right? There are ways to overcome and figure out anything as long as you have that mindset. The other is, Rochelle, start before you're ready. I think we as women specifically wait for one more degree. Let me go home and noodle on it. Let me write it out. And unfortunately, like our male counterparts who probably have like a third of what we bring to the table are the first to raise their hand and say, I'll do it. And then they go figure it out. Right. And so this notion of start before you're ready has really helped me, not just in my career, but just in life, because it kind of takes your breath away and then you go do it.
Oh, I love that advice. I feel like I need to write that on my wall. No, on my mirror. Start before you're ready. Okay, and then our last question is, what is one habit that you do daily that you would recommend to our listeners?
I do this thing where I ask this question of, wouldn't it be great if? Right. And I usually try to write three things down every day. Wouldn't it be great if we don't hold meetings on a Friday? Wouldn't it be great if we could take a 2 hour lunch break instead of one or whatever it is? Right. And just that opportunity to kind of dream with the lid off is so freeing and liberating. And I come up with some of the best ideas doing just that simple, fill in the blank. Wouldn't it be great if? And what is that? Because a lot of times we don't give ourselves permission to think like that or to talk like that. We go with whatever is in front of us, and the squeakiest wheel gets the attention, and that's it, right? We don't really allow ourselves to dream.
I love the idea of dreaming and giving your space to do things a little bit differently. What have you found that you've done differently by asking that of yourself? Wouldn't it be great if?
The other thing I always say is do one thing that makes you gasp, right? Something that makes you gasp every day. And usually every day in my wouldn't it be great if list, there's something gasp worthy, right? Like, for example, when I moved out of employee advocacy to come back to customer comms, I was on a roll with employee advocacy, and it was very comfortable. And then I'm like, oh, getting too comfortable, and the notion of coming into a team that had been together for a long time, and it was a very flat team, not very people management opportunities. It was causing some gasping on my part, right? But I was just like, no, I need to, wouldn't it be great if I could go back and be with customers again? Right? It's changed my outlook on doing scary things is good. And that your ability to do scary things and take risks, it's what's going to get you further faster.
Such good advice. I love that you're constantly, and I don't want to say taking risks, but willing to do something different and try something different. And I just really admire that about you and your career and what you're doing. And I just so appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This has been so fun.
Yeah,
I haven't answered these type of questions in a long time, so I appreciate it.
absolutely. So Rani Mani shares her efforts to elevate customer stories for Adobe through her online presence. Rani, where can our listeners find you?
I'd say LinkedIn, just Rani Mani on LinkedIn, and then on Twitter, Rani Mani 0707 is my Twitter handle.
Perfect. And then Ronnie, I noticed that some of the stories that you shared with us are on an Adobe blog. Is there a place where they can find your stories on that blog?
If they just go and do like on the blogs.adobe.com, there's drop downs where you can look at the creator stories. You'll see several of them. But whether they're my stories or not, all of those stories are amazing. So I just encourage you to go to blogs.adobe.com, and you'll see so many just incredible things people are doing in the world.
Wow. Wonderful. And then we'll include links to some of the stories that we talked about on the show in the show notes so that people will be able to access those and learn more about Milo Fowler and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and some of those other creators that we talked about today.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ronnie. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye.
We have additional resources and links in our show notes at justsayitcommunications.com. Transcripts are up on the website and the video is up on YouTube. My team is Andrea Casas-Tapete, Zara Momini, and Shinga Yoshimine. And my name is Rochelle Bedell. If you enjoyed this show, please like and share it. And don't forget to apply what you learn on the show. We hope you'll join us again soon for another conversation.